warehouse with the cooperative, have access to the market, and in the process, earn a living, not just surviving.
Prof. Network 3 again. Prof. Equaco. The gun is thrown out again, right? It's here coming. It's rejoining. It's rejoining. We acknowledge Mali in the house and Egypt as Prof rejoins. Prof. Okay. Prof. Sorry for the network.
Let me apologize for that.
No, you can't. This is business. This African business, right?
So well, I move from the issue of the cooperative to the final aspect. That is, the government should, in a way, invest heavily when it comes to road networks. We believe that this will enable the poor and the peasant farmers to be active players in the creative economy. This is where I would like to say thank you, Madam Larissa, for the opportunity given to me to interact with us today. I will sit back and entertain questions from colleagues and young Africans in the house. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. That's extremely powerful. These are practical applications where we find integration of indigenous knowledge with the modern farming for improved outputs. I'll open the floor for questions and comments. Please use the emoji if you have a comment or question. Kindly use the emoji so that you make your contributions. And of course, the question of where are community leaders, I would also want to ask, who are the community leaders now? Questions, comments for Prof? Please use the emoji. We'll start with Biegun, coming from the agricultural sector. Then colleagues, please use the emoji.
Thank you, Professor Ekweke. I don't know if I pronounced that one correctly. I don't think there's anyone here who has enjoyed the presentation, but I want to be biased. Because the subject sits right in my heart. I work for an institution based in agriculture, and we do work also trying to see how can we improve productivity out there in the farms. How can we improve the farmer, who is the major person who feeds us? And when the farmer is hungry, that means he will also be angry, annoyed with us. So, as you say, that's a very dangerous element. And it's worse than anything else. And the way it also reduces the dignity of the person. Hunger is indignified. So when we have almost 80% of the hungry people coming from East Africa, we can assume East Africa is angry. So my one major question, Professor, is as we try to address the issue of food insecurity, there is a thought that we can easily address the issue of food insecurity by farmers not thinking to produce for to feed themselves, but change it to a mentality of producing to sell, the element of trade, so that farmers are not producing to eat or to survive, but they produce targeting a market. Because if they do that, they have in such a way that done away with the food insecurity, because they'll have produced the volumes. I don't know what your opinion is on that. If we target commercialization, there could be a chance of succeeding in eradicating food insecurity. And then the issues of the technology, I don't even have to ask. That is something that how the African continent should be measuring on. Because when you recommend maybe you have a variety that can produce highly, but you use the wrong tools, you use the wrong spacing, you'll still get low. And without technology, definitely you will not get anything. So thank you, Professor, for that. I'm very happy to have been here and listening to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bigard. Before Prof responds, let's take a question by Isaruk. It's an example, his comment. Then Prof will pick the two and we pick the next set of questions in the end. Isaruk.
Okay. Good morning, Africans. Good morning. Yeah, I really enjoyed the lecture of the Prof, and I must say he has done justice to what he has done so far. I want to make some comments in respect to what he has said. All the suggestions are critical in order to ensure food security, sustainability, availability, and accessible. Area where I'm most concerned is this political will in respect to a mentioned cooperative. I knew before now the government cooperative were established in order to support farmers. But it's from our experience over the years, the same those in authority who use their cronies to siphon those that are made for farmers. Cooperatives will be open and grant will be given to them and a lot of things. But at the end of the day, the peasant farmers, the rural farmers will not have access to it. People in authority will siphon those things. At the end, they will say they have given products, other things, fertilizer to farmers, and which the farmer does not even receive. Even the fishermen will not even get all those boats. It is the cronies of those in power, authority, will share those things. So my question is, how can this be addressed so that anything made for farmers will get to those that is being meant for? Secondly, the issue of corruption everywhere. How can this corruption be? Because if corruption is addressed and we change our mentality, our way of doing things, I believe we'll have sufficient food in this country, Nigeria. For instance, during the COVID-19 palliative, some tough people got those palliatives that be given to the poor, and some of them keep it and use it for their birthday party and which cause a lot of problem in the country. So those are part of the things that are hindering the peasant farmers or agricultural sector, respect other sector to grow, and that is why we are having problem of insecurity in the food sector. That is my humble submission. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Prof. Do you want to respond to those two? First, most of them have been highlighted, then take the next set of questions.
Larissa, this is a well-articulated question. And he's speaking because he's a Nigerian, and I love that. His narrative is the Nigeria paradox. And that is my summary. That is the Nigeria paradox. There is going to be corruption even after this generation. because the mind is what is corrupted. And we pass these practices to the next generation unknowingly. And at a point in time, it becomes a way of thinking and acting. So I summarize those ones within the domain of Nigeria paradox. Then I come to the issue of political will. I will always tell Nigerians that we should not wait for Nigeria as a country to be better before we become the best in the world. Rather, we can become the best in the world so as to change the narratives in Nigeria. So discussing the political will aspect, we know it is a failure. And my thinking over time has always been at the community level. So in my preamble, I was of the opinion that, look, we can identify multi-task community stakeholders. Because in most Nigerian society, failure at a community level is a big shame. And because we have this cultural understanding that the village exists, and that is why we exist, therefore we must not offend a village. Most persons in the villages, they still have what I may call spiritual capital. Therefore, if our economic activities are organized around these multi-task community stakeholders, access to the market through these persons becomes possible. Now, the fear is, can this be used as a political weapon, or can we weaponize these stakeholders for another duty? That I cannot say a word, because all of us are open to temptation. But I'm of the view that if these multi-tax community stakeholders are used as instrument or economic instrument or change agent when it comes to access to the market, then the livelihood of these persons in the village becomes better. That is where I'm going to address that one. Then I go to the second question. Is the farm in order to change the life of the farmer so as to address the the problem of food insecurity. It's only in self-sufficiency that we commercialize farm produce as peasant farmers. So I was not of the position that we refuse to meet our self and solve our self problems because we want to run after a market. No, I believe first in self, but to achieve this self, the approach to farming has to change. When the approach to farming changes, then the yield will change. Then people will have access to the farm produce. Then accessibility follows. Sorry, affordability follows. And that affordability is what changes other factors around the farmer and the farm. So do not commercialize your farm produce when you are in a state of acute deprivation. So I will excuse myself from the understanding that we should commercialize at our own expense. No. Let's produce so that the spillover, and that is the thesis around international trade, the spillover or the surplus or the excess of what we produce is being taken at the market level, and the produce from that unit comes back to the farmer. Narissa, I think that is how I'm going to look at it. Thank you. While I still expect more questions.
Thank you. There's a hand by Dr. Beth, but before Dr. Beth, I don't know if His Excellency the Ambassador wants to make any comments on that presentation. Ambassador, if you listen
Thank
to
you
this.
very much, Prof, for the well-presented paper. Now, I can deduce that you are speaking on the livelihood, as you said, that it comprises of all activities, assets, and all what it takes to make a living. Yes, it is true. But in Nigeria here, as you make your points towards the southwest Nigeria, I want to cite instances from North Central. You see, there are so many lands that are not cultivated in North Central area. For instance, from Jeba down to Makwa, down to Beningwari, and up to Kaduna states like that, I can figure out that lands are there that are not cultivated. They are just pure land. Maybe it's as a result of government reservation or any other meaning to that. I can't say per se. And for those who can even plant, let's say, for instance, the peasant farmers that are able to make farming, for them to affect is one thing, and for them to be able to sell their products is another thing. Some of these peasant farmers, after affecting, they prefer to hold the products so that when the price of the products are jacked up, they will sell it to the public, to the society. There are some who prefer to even transport the products to other countries, thinking is by doing so that they are going to make more profits. And by this, it is making it difficult for people in the community to lay their hands on the food that they're supposed to eat to feed their family. That is on the part of the farmers. Then, on the part of access, that is access road for this very farmer to distribute their products is another problem. The bad roads in Nigeria deprive farmers from transporting their products to other neighboring town or to other states. Let me start another instance. There was a time I was coming from northern side. When we got to Mokwa side, we met a trailer that fell, and we learned that the trailer has failed for the past 3 days.
Yes.
Evacuation. This deprives people from moving down. We have to turn back to go and pass through other way, Mina, Lokoja, before move down to Kwara here. I think government have a lot to do in that very part too. Moreover, now looking at the world at large, European countries are far in technology, education, agriculture, and so on and so forth like that. I can see that African countries are lacking behind in so many activities, including this agriculture we are discussing of. There is nothing holding us if people can contribute to how we can manage our resources to help ourselves and even help other people in the whole world. Now, we got to know that there are a series of people that have intelligence of making use of what God gave them to produce series of things, which can be of use to society. But who has helped them? No. No intervention from the individual or group or government or this kind of people. There was a time I was watching network news, Nigeria network news, when they brought a lady from Niger State that constructed movable caterpillar, movable caterpillar for harvesting. It was so interesting. For this kind of lady, who will support her to realize this very knowledge? I think this is part of what individual can contribute to make the country great. And this is part of where governments can support the individual to contribute their quota to the development of the country. So I think the individual as philanthropists and the governments also have a lot to do in the area of livelihood. And when we are talking about when we are talking about the accessibility of this very food, you know, we believe that the rich people can get more than the poor people. And we are talking about the livelihood. We're supposed to have equal to the standard of living. I think our government have a long way to go in making sure that people are having good life to live. And that is what can make the world to progress. And that is what can make the country to even good. Because it's healthy country that we can talk, it's when the country is healthy that's why we can talk of wealthy. And if Africa too wants to be great and become recognized like European countries, I think we have a long way to go in contributing to all this kind of sector like health, agriculture, technology, and so on and so forth like that. And I think through this very program that we're making, we're supposed to make advocates to the government to realize all this so that the Africans too can become part of world in progress as we expected. So, sir, I want you to please make sure that you emphasize on this very write-up on this very livelihood so that governments can aware of what they can do to support the society on this very aspect. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Doc. I'm impressed with what I heard. I just want to take you back since we are Nigerians. Just travel with me from Jeba, okay, to Jega, then from Jega to Sokoto. And 6 hours and the land left uncultivated. And like we were making reference to Mokwa all the way to Mina, Kaduna, some part of Jos, the same thing. I'm going to go to East Africa. Those from East Africa, they will understand me. When you move from Kigali to Bujumbura, please look at that region. Then when you move from Bujumbura, looking Kivu area, you will see the power of land on use. When you move from Mombasa, traveling down, going to Arusha, because I have traveled on that route more than 3 times, it's just a whole vast of land. It's when you get to Arusha, you begin to see people who farm fruits. Then those who will travel by land from what we call as you move all the way from Uganda and you go down connecting Nairobi, you pass through Eldoret, Kasabet, Eldoret, you discover that crossing the line of the equator, the land is just open and there is nothing on it. Now, those who have traveled, like I have been to South Carolina, and I've seen and have traveled this distance by road, some by train, is all farming. Those who have been to Thailand, they will also tell you the same thing, that you see rice farm, even in the Philippines, you see rice farm across board as you move. From Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, they are not different from us. The only difference is that they have improved on how they farm and where they farm and what they plant at a particular area. That is science behind it. Then, if you come down to the aspect of hoarding, what is motivating the hoarding you observe is because we plant in season. We don't plant out of season. And when one plants in season, he hoards with the hope that out of season, the price will go up. So if we were planting in season and out of season, you discover that the power to hoard can be minimized. And the market forces will compel the person to think out of the box. Then you made a very profound contribution to the discussion in terms of Nigeria experience. Road, which is important to accessibility. I was expecting something from Zafara, and it was going to pass through Offa, then connect and leak. The truck was on the road for 3 days. Production was stopped for 1 day. We were expecting flesh from Taraba State, goat meat and cow from Taraba State. There was a delay. I will have to source for it here at Ibadan at a more expensive, the Oyo market. It was more expensive than what we planned for. Then when it comes to cassava that we are being, you see Nigeria uprooting and selling ABCD, the person who is processing it for glucose earns more money than the woman at the farm, because these women have not been organized. So they are being exploited at the farm level, whereas adding value to the farm process anymore from it. Process is because they have discovered that there's more money in it. But this knowledge, if it can be brought down to the level of these multi-tax community stakeholders, you discover that we must have organized a massive labor force that can even raise money to add value to the farm produce. And it's at this level that we're seeing things changing. You made reference to a philanthropist. I was happy. The question I'm going to ask that to help me preach by providing the answer. If we have 10 Tony Elumelu in Nigeria, I always tell people, and when I'm discussing issues of investment and employment, this mass army of youths in Nigeria, I always tell people that if today Tony Elumelu organizes a conference and says, look, those I have invested in, let's transform this economy for good, people will vote Tony Elumelu into power. And those people he has changed their life, they will also change others' lives. And in this process of doing that, you discover that he cannot exercise control. Imagine we have 10 Tony Elumelu in Nigeria. And these Tony Elumelus that I'm talking about, they address different sectors of the economy. Giving, I do not subscribe to giving because it breeds dependency. But I subscribe to the aspect of transforming through giving, so that those who have received, they become active actors in the economy instead of active consumers in the economy. That is the way I think about it, and that is the way I sense it, and that is the way I want to look at it as a person. Then I take it further to tell you, Ma, that Nigeria, as it is today, who is the government. Because the elites, the educated ran away from politics, the garage boys are now ruling us. And what do you expect from them? What do you expect from somebody who stole in billions, only to go and kept such billions in his house without investing such? It's lack of ideas. And what drives creative economy is business ideas. So if we develop policies as well, we are going to give to these political leaders, are they thinking political leaders? I always believe, it's on that I always believe that let us go back to our communities and raise and transform such, so that it becomes a business model to train the next generation of leaders. And as we transform our local villages, those politicians will no longer have any political agenda to bring to the table. Because in my village, water and electricity, today we have conquered that. So once you bring those things, it's a dead manifesto. And that is why I believe that at the grassroots, things can change, and they can change for good. Thank you, Doc. And I don't know if I was able to respond to your concerns.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Prof. For the interest of time, I don't know, Elliot, if yours is a quick question, so that we move to the next presenter. Elliot, Uganda.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nerissa, for the opportunity to ask the question. And I want to tell the great professor from Nigeria that thank you so much for that robust presentation. It was nice, and I only had one question that technology is playing an important role actually on matters food security, and the reason as to why most of our African countries are still struggling and in a third world practices and is because actually. So, Prof, the question that I wanted actually to ask was, what parameters do you think can be employed to enrich farmers with skill set and knowledge on food security, since that is a very great challenge actually everywhere, beginning from East Africa, West Africa, everywhere. That is the greatest challenge, because you find that most farmers, farmers might maybe, they have everything, they have assets, they have land, but the knowledge they don't have. And that is actually what is bringing down everything. It is derailing development, it is breeding corruption. And so what do you think that, how do you think that technology can be used, can be harnessed on matters food security? So that is the question that I have.
Thank you very, very much. I'm just carried away because you reminded me of my 7 years in Rwanda and my 7 years of running through those countries in East Africa community. Thank you. Let me speak from my experience in Rwanda. If that we do it, because my years there changed my orientation and had to discuss and deconstruct the term technology, because in such a way that some people look at it as something rocket science, and we're able to bring it to a level that is so simplified and applicable to everybody. And this is what I'm going to say. While I was in Rwanda, that was when I discovered that this issue of biogas is as simple as anything. So you have a Rwandese having a cow at home, feeding that cow, the poo-poo from that cow to cook his food. The meat from the cow is what he uses as chibugutu, what I may call yogurt, cheese, and milk for the household. And you know, some of us from East Africa, the cha that we drink is actually directly from the cow. Now, it's a knowledge that was transformed at that level that brought such a transformation. So if somebody is talking about biogas in the future, you will say, look, my mother is already practicing it at home. And that is the issue of technology. Now, what it takes is so simple. That is to say, we are ready to exchange and to transfer knowledge back with skills to deliver. So I'm going to put it in this way. In light of my construct, there were factors that I put on board. Greenhouse farming. If you are from Nairobi, if you are from Kenya, you will discover that this is a common practice. And because of this greenhouse farming, a lot of persons are able to plant in season and out of season. Now, the weather down there in Kesabet, Eldoret is so friendly that even the cows, the plants, the greens are always wonderful.
Terrible network. So, it's hanging again. I think we'll be getting back some.
Hi, Nerissa.
Hi. Now I'm just looking at Prof is hanging for the second time. As he hangs, if we manage to get him back, that's fine. If not, I'll hand over the program to be gone for the next presentation. Be gone.
Thank you, Larissa. And I hope Prof will be back in a very short while so that he also catches up with the next presentation, which also addresses another aspect of the challenges within Africa. The challenge here is even with the technologies, are we inheriting things from the past? And especially, are we also inheriting practices and some practices which may not have been very good, especially which were planted during the colonial period? Most of Africa went through some colonial period, except maybe Ethiopia and a few other states. So to show us the way on how to heal from that and maybe move forward, we would want to welcome Professor Wane from Canada to address that specific issue in her topic, which is talking about healing from the colonial past. I don't know to preempt. So, Professor Wane, Njoki Wane, welcome.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and also thank you so much for the previous speaker. He talked, to my heart, and the questions that were asked are the questions, probably I would also deal with. We have challenges. We have lots and lots of challenges in Africa. And that's why when Nerissa invited me, and I want to say thank you, Nerissa, for inviting me to present on this forum. I felt that because we have shared about what we have and what we need to do and so on and so forth, I thought maybe we can, turn it the other way around and talk about colonial sickness. And that's why I'm saying my topic today is healing from colonial sickness, and I'm using an African indigenous perspective. So I'm not going to be telling you anything that you do not know. I'm just revisiting and saying the essence of paying attention to our sickness. And just to clarify, I'm not talking of the bodily sickness. I'm not talking of the physical illnesses. I'm talking of the psychological sicknesses, emotional sicknesses that the colonizers, neo-colonialism has continued to be with us for the longest period of time. And this is more than 70 years for some countries in Africa. And it's not because we don't have the resources. It's a question of taking a moment and to start taking stock of what needs to be done. And on that note, I'll pause and give thanks to my ancestors for giving this opportunity to share with you. If we are all around, I'll pour out some libation just to welcome my ancestors, and I'll do it in my own little place, evoking my ancestors, inviting them to be with me, and saying thank you to my Creator as well. Again, it's something that we have shied away from because of colonization. It's good to go back to the drawing board and so on and so forth. So I invite my ancestors, I ask blessings from my Creator to be with me. And Nerissa, I'm going to give you a responsibility. As I conclude, make sure I call the ancestors again, because I'll need to send them away. Otherwise, they'll be with us all the time. I'll need to say thank you to them and to say goodbye for their presence. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about what is colonial sickness, and then identify 3 items on how to deal with colonial sickness, and then talk about African indigenous knowledge, because I think that's what we have been talking about, and then have some conclusion. When we talk about when we talk about colonial sickness, what I'm talking about is we have been objects of research. A lot of money is being poured in Africa for research. A lot of money is being poured to check on our herbal medicine. A lot of research is being poured on how they can use our land to grow GMO foods. A lot of research has been, a lot of money is being poured to do experiments on our bodies, whether these particular vaccines can work on the Black bodies, on the African bodies, and so on and so forth. We need, the researchers, the librarians, the academics, the intellectuals on this forum. We really need to start questioning, how are we allowing the outsiders to make objects of research? Because the idea is they come with the mighty dollar and they say, we'll give you so much. And as a result of that, it becomes a sickness, because the more they give us, the more we want. And the classification of classism within Africa continues, and so on and so forth. To some extent, and I say this with a lot of emotions within me, we have accepted that, that our culture is, I'm not talking of everybody. I start with myself, acceptance that we have lost our culture. And I must say, the last speaker has traveled widely. I must say, especially in East Africa, we have lost our culture. At least in West Africa, when I visit West Africa, I can still see lots and lots and lots of culture, the African culture. East Africa, we are gone. Even the traditional clothes, now we are using the Maasais as our traditional clothes. We have been borrowing from West Africa. Why? Why have we allowed ourselves to lose the very essence of who we are, our culture? Because our culture carries the very lifeline of who we are. That's colonial sickness by allowing that. I mean, right now we are able to communicate with a foreign language. That's excellent. But can we still communicate with this foreign language and at the same time we maintain our languages? I have had people apologizing. Oh, you know, I am this and this, but I don't speak my language. Oh, my children don't speak my language. I am a culprit to that. I'm ashamed of it. And my children are struggling now because I can say we are being awakened to learn our language. We can be multilinguals. And when I talk about being multilingual, it doesn't mean that we are speaking French, German, English, and so on and so forth. We are speaking Yoruba, we are speaking Kikuyu, we are speaking Kikamba, we are speaking Kale. We are speaking all the languages of Africa. We can be multilinguals, but we feel that, you know, we are liberated when we are saying, oh, you know, my children cannot speak this language. That's colonial sickness. I mean, when you travel in Africa, you see lineups of people on McDonald's, on KFC, on you know, Domino pizzas. I mean, that's sickness in itself. When we have indigenous foods that we should be emphasizing. I'm not even going to mention about medicine, the colonial medicine that has brought even more sicknesses within us. Again, that's colonial sicknesses and itself. Education. Education is another huge, huge colonial sickness. We have, and this is why this forum is so good for us, because gradually, we'll be able to recoup, we'll be able to go back to the past and excavate what constituted our African indigenous knowledges, our African indigenous spirituality, our African indigenous medicine, and it's happening. That's the beauty about it. The other colonial sickness is we see exploitation happening, and somehow we are in denial. We are justifying why we are allowing foreigners to come and exploit our land. Well, why we are allowing foreigners to come and excavate our oil, excavate our minerals. I know the political turmoil when you try to resist, when you try to challenge some of these things, because we do have mysterious deaths. We do have people disappearing. When you oppose some political people who are involved in exploitation of our land, exploitation of our people, and so on and so forth. Another colonial sickness is corruption. I think Kenya, I think somebody said we are the 5th corrupt country in the world. Why? I mean, honestly, it's such an illness that I have no idea, and the previous speaker talked about that. I have no idea how we can heal from that colonial sickness. We mastered it so well from our colonial masters in terms of corruption. Because corruption in the West is so well packaged that they don't call it corruption, but it is corruption. And then the other aspect of it is devaluation of our knowledge. Devaluation of our knowledge that I have talked about that. We didn't need to go to our schools. We need to reform what is happening in our schools and to start celebrating what is ours, what is our knowledge. Another sickness, and this is a more serious sickness, and I call it psychological colonial sickness, hatred of the self. Not everybody has hatred of the self, but a lot of us are running towards whiteness, are running towards white people. And we don't do it consciously many times. We do it very unconsciously because of the way the Eurocentric paradigm has programmed it. So how do we know we are running towards whiteness? How do we know that? How do we know that? I have no idea, but it's being conscious when we are running towards it. The next thing I'm going to say is very sensitive. It's about our skin color. I am telling you, discoloration of our skin is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Skin creams that will make you run towards whiteness. We are allowing that. What is it that we can do as people from the continent to heal from that colonial sickness? What can we do to heal from that colonial sickness? Because remember, I always say this, somehow the colonizer used a very, very, very nonsensical element to colonize us, the skin color. They created a God that is white. They created everything that is white. And we have seen it. Maybe not all of us, but we have seen it. You go to restaurants, to hotels in Africa, and there is a white person seated next to you. The waiters, the black waiters will come and serve the white person because of the skin color, because the skin color translates money. That's colonial sickness. So we didn't need, I can only give you just a couple of the colonial sicknesses. When you have time, take a moment and write down all the colonial sicknesses, and probably at some point, Narissa, we can start debating how we need to get rid of the colonial sicknesses, because until we deal with that, it will be very difficult for us to make any progress. The previous speaker was speaking about, the Philippines and other, Eastern countries that have really, really made progress. How have they done it? How have they done it? Why is it that we are so rich? We have so much resources that the Europeans and other countries, Chinese, they are running towards Africa. And yet we are running away from Africa because of exploitation. I call them 3 steps of healing from colonial sickness. Step number 1 is we need to identify what colonization is and its impact, that the broad understanding of colonization. Colonization is alive and well. And yes, we have gotten our political independence, but we are still under the yoke of the colonizers. We are still, the colonized subject. How do we know it when we see it? How do we identify neocolonialism that has persisted for so long? Again, we need to identify that. How do we identify that? Once we have identified those colonial yokes that are choking us, we need to, that is now number 2, we need to dismantle those structures of colonization. It will not take one day, it will not take 1 month, it will not take 1 year. It will take a concerted effort of planning, replanning, and implementing on how to dismantle the structures of colonization. I'm talking about the social structures of colonization. I'm talking about the cultural aspect of colonization. The colonizers take just a little bit of what we have and they twist it and they make it their own and they sell it back to us. I'll give you an example. Kenya is famous for coffee and tea. What happens? We export everything to Europe, to America, and then they ship it back to us in nicely in nice teams. Why can't we? I know it's very, very difficult to dismantle that because of, coffee is gold for us. Tea is gold for us. I know it's really, really hard to dismantle that. Go to Ghana, cocoa. They take it to Europe and then it comes back. Chocolate is a commodity that is eaten everywhere. How do we dismantle those economic structures? Again, I am glad that we have this forum. I am glad that we are celebrating 2 years, 24 months of this, because I think once we start identifying and dismantling, we can do it step by step. And, we can do it in such a way that we are not threatening, because as soon as anything appears threatening, what happens is that you either disappear or something happens. I am not sure, but it's a very interesting way of silencing whoever tries to interfere with the colonization and its reproduction that has consumed us, that has its own body, that is invisible, and so on and so forth. Again, I'll say we need to dismantle the structures. How we do it, it's a forum for us. It's a question for us to start talking about and starting to implement that. The third step of healing from colonial sickness is to take action. And I alluded that, to take action, to create new structures. We need to decolonize. How will those new structures look like? I have no idea. And already with the research that is happening here, we are creating new structures. We are taking action. And if I move on, what I'm saying is that we need to heal. And healing is a process which is informed, and I'll keep saying over and over again, we need to know ourselves. We are proud people. Africans, we are proud people. We are extremely, extremely intelligent people. We have been inventors. Let's take that back. So knowing ourselves, knowing how our mind is being controlled with a remote control, knowing how our spirituality has been taken over, knowing what is the root cause of our sickness, as I have talked about, and knowing our past and our present realities, and much more. I'll go on and then, so that's in a nutshell. Now I want to come into the gritty of conceptualizing healing from colonial sickness. We need to ask ourselves, what makes us sick? Because, when I talk about sickness, somebody will think, oh, she has a cold, she has this particular mode of sick. What makes us sick? And I want to pose that question to each one of you. What makes you sick? I'm not talking about the physical sickness. What makes you uneasy? What makes you uneasy? Your mind, your body, your soul. In the West, I'll tell you what makes me very, very sick is the oppression that I face on a daily basis. The oppression that I face on a daily basis because of being African, because of being woman, because of my, talking with an African accent, and so on and so forth. From a global African perspective, what makes us sick, and we need to conceptualize what creates fear. What creates fear? Like, when COVID-19 was introduced, there was fear. How do we start dealing with fear? How do we control fear that is created outside to create sickness for us? How do we deal with foreignness that creates sickness in us? The other thing that we need to conceptualize healing from colonial sickness, and the previous speaker talked about that, is how do we start dealing with economic development that is conceptualized within Africa, that is not imposed from outside. We have development, we have goals of development. Who has conceptualized those goals of development? Why are they being conceptualized outside? Why can't we, as a forum, as Africans, come up with goals of development that speak to us? Goals of development that starts from the village and comes up, but not from the top and then they're imposed in the village. And then if I can go on, and how do we ensure that we are not robbing the farmers of their livelihood? Because when we start condemning, like kalalu, like cassava leaves, and we know these are the foods that has all kinds of proteins. And then what is amazing when you think about how our food has been hijacked, the farmers, there are some people who go to local farmers, they take their food, give them peanuts, take them to supermarkets, and those foods are so expensive. How do we start controlling the production and exchange of foods that is so important to us, that is organic food for ourselves, and the farmer benefits from it? Again, the previous speaker spoke very eloquently about that. And then what is healing using an indigenous African healing is, again, reminding ourselves that we do have, and a lot of researchers on this forum have conceptualized that and have presented. I remember the last forum we had, there were presentations, I think by people from Nigeria and Ethiopia, that the healing practices that we have as Africans, and this is healing from the mind, healing from the soul, and physical healing, are thousands and thousands of years old. Thousands and thousands of years old. Yet we have been told that we have nothing. What is it that we need to do to ensure that people actually start believing in that, in those practices of healing? The other thing is, in terms of African indigenous healing practices, is also paying attention to indigenous healing that involves emotional and emancipation. Because unless you're physically, you are emotionally liberated, you cannot heal. You cannot heal mentally, you cannot heal bodily. And the reason why I'm saying that is the other mode of healing that we need to pay attention to is disrupting the colonizers' claim. Somehow the colonizers came and said that there was the belief that Africa did not know anything. And Fanon talks about it. Because he said, these Africans knew nothing. Is that true? It's not true. I always tell people in the West, Africans are the smartest people I've ever seen. Africans are so smart. And I don't, if I'm in a good mood, I say, you are seeing the best by seeing me in the West. I am very smart. And I say that unapologetically because I do have the back and the support of my ancestors who have invented all kinds of things that we witness today. And then it's given a different name. Some thoughts that I have is, we really, to actually, again, conceptualizing and healing from the colonial sickness and becoming, dealing with the three aspects that I've talked about, we need to start addressing how we have become prisoners of the entire colonial system. We have become prisoners of the entire colonial system. How do we dismantle that? How do we get out of that cage? Sometimes I feel caged. How do we start dismantling that cage, thread by thread, pulling thread by thread, so that we can walk out of that cage with our heads high? And I have witnessed some of our leaders from Africa who have challenged the status quo. And we need to emulate those kinds of leaders, and we need to take those words of challenging the status quo to our schools. And of course, the question I'll constantly keep saying is, how do we free ourselves from the yoke of colonizers? And I'm talking about collectively and individually. How do we, because whether we like it or not, we are in denial. We are choked. We are choked by the yoke of colonialism. Whether we admit it or not, we are trying this forum, and I'm glad we are celebrating 24 months since it began. I'm almost concluding, and but what I'm advocating, or what I'm trying to establish, or what I'm alluding to is, how do we decolonize? And I'll say, because by decolonizing the mind, the spirit, and the soul, I'm saying that we need to decolonize by establishing our relationship with the land. Land is everything for us, Black people, African people. We need to step on the soil, because we learn from the soil, we learn from the land. We'll seep that energy from the land, because the foreigners have known what is on the land. And when we establish that relationship with the land, we'll hesitate when we are signing a contract to give a piece of Africa to foreigners for exploitation, or to give a piece of Africa for exploitation of different minerals, or different oils, or different this and different that. We need to decolonize our bodies by paying attention to the foods we put in our bodies. And when I talk about the foods, I'm not just talking about the food we eat, the mental food, the spiritual food, the food of the soul. Because unless we do that, it will be very, very difficult for us to even start addressing the colonial sickness. And when I talk about decolonizing, we start with the self, because I cannot be a preacher. And many times us as teachers, as speakers, we say, do this, do this, do this. But I always say that we need to start with ourselves. And then after that, we can go to the community, so that we can have community-based intervention on how to deal with decolonizing the mind, decolonizing our land, decolonizing everything. And I don't want to keep repeating it over and over again as I come to the conclusion of my talk. We need to keep emphasizing the mastery of our indigenous theory. Many people will say, oh, indigenous, African indigenous ways of knowing are theoretical. We are theorists. We are theorists. So we need to master those theories of indigenous ways of knowing. We need to master the teachings of our ancestors. We need to find out how do we create balance? Because if we are unbalanced physically, emotionally, and intellectually, we cannot stand on the land that I talked about. How do we start doing restoration? I have some suggestions. We need, in order to create balance and restoration, we need to start making sense of our ceremonies. And when I talk about ceremonies, people will say, oh, wow, that is, they are practicing witchcraft. These rituals, they are unchristian. These rituals are like this. And I say, pause and think. When somebody is criticizing the rituals, like what I did, pouring a bit of libation to invite my ancestors to be with me, is that witchcraft? It's not, but we have been programmed to think it's witchcraft. We have been programmed to think that it's ungodly, which is not. So making sense of our rituals, making our traditional knowledge alive, keeping it alive. And every gathering that we have, we should try and make sure that we have a ritual that we do to keep it alive. Because by keeping it alive, we are preserving it. We are passing it to our next generation. Because we have written about it, but writing is not enough. We need to practice it. We need to practice it. When I was invited for this, or because now it's 6 a.m., I woke up at 3 a.m. When I started listening, or when I opened my mouth, I wasn't planning to do the libation, but something told me, no, Jock, you have to invite us. I paid attention, and that's what I did. You know, by doing that, by mastering our indigenous knowledges, by mastering our culture, what we are going to do is we are going to create a gown. I call it an invisible gown that will be weaved with our cultural identity. You know, when I go to West Africa and I buy those clothes and I wear them, I feel so proud. I feel that I've been clothed. We need now to have that invisible gown that is weaved with our cultural beliefs, with our values, and so on and so forth. And we'll do this from a macro and micro level. And when we are weaving that, we are weaving from not necessarily the physical aspects of it, and also from our spiritual understanding. Because we can't leave the thread of our spirituality outside. It has to be weaved together. In conclusion, healing from colonial sickness is all about decolonizing. That's what I've been talking about. We need to decolonize. It's not easy, but we need to decolonize. We need to understand things beyond what is obvious. We need to understand beyond what is obvious. And I would say that there is no conclusion at all to what I'm talking about. It's a journey, and we have to keep walking step by step, step by step. It will not be realized within 1 year, 10 years. It's a process. And I'll leave you with this proverb. A bird can only wave its tail. I cannot wave the tail of anybody else. Africa cannot wave the tail of anybody else, of another continent. We are the ones that can wave that tail. And what that means is that We are the only ones who can rescue us from our sickness. We are the only ones who can come up with the concoction of our healing. We are the only ones who will start coming up with forms of resistance. We are the only ones who will be able to decolonize our mind physically, intellectually, and emotionally. And with that note, I want to thank my ancestors for being with me, as I thank this forum for listening to me. I also want to thank my creator for sustaining me and for sustaining us, and to pour blessings on all of us. Ashe, asante sana, thank you.
Hope you've taken back your ancestors.
Yes, I have.
We don't have them in the house.
Yes,
she's built them farewell.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Njoki Wane. It reminded me of when you go into any history class, you are told there are two classes of history in Africa. There's the prehistory and there's the after history. And we used to ask, why are we talking about prehistory in Africa? Does it mean there was no history in Africa at some stage? And we read some book and they said, sure, there was no history in Africa before the white man came in. Was it true? Yeah, the explanation was before the white man came, there was only darkness in Africa, and they say darkness is not part of history. It's not a subject of history. So that's why they said there was no history. So it makes us start asking ourselves, in this forum now that we are discussing 2 years, we've discussed the loss of indigenous knowledge, we've discussed the loss of local languages, indigenous languages. We've talked about loss of even the natural resources, the herbs we had, the skill sets we had, the culture we had. Could it have been because of this sickness? We were told that is evil and it's bad, and they're all labeled black. Maybe we are losing all that because of that sickness that Professor is talking about. So let's see how many people would want to ask a few questions, which Professor may address, so that, and since it's almost lunch hour, we make them short. A short question so that it invites a short answer.
Yeah, let me just comment this and say, currently I'm actually researching African past. And it's amazing what we have, what has been masked. It's amazing to find out that we used to trade with the Americas. We used to sail to the Americas way before colonization came. We used to sail and trade with with the Europeans, but they had to find a way of masking that they discovered America. There is ample evidence from my research that is all lies.
So that indeed says there was history before the colonizers came. So where how do you sector this? Let's go West Africa. Let's get 2 questions from West Africa. The Western Africa, not West Africa, the Western region. Nigeria, Cameroon, and those others. So if anybody has a question to Professor along those lines, let's have 2 quick ones. or comments? Seems there's none. Kenya. Before I go to Kenya, let me invite Dr. Kip. Now that she's also in the diaspora, and she may be experiencing the real colonialism in the current sense, where there is a lot of discrimination, maybe from, is she feeling the whiteness out there in Canada? Is Dr. Kim? Kip, sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. So again, good morning. It's morning now. We have transnited. So you're asking me if I feel the racism?
Yes.
Yeah, it's racism is, or any experiences that you get in the West, oppression, everything, it's quite invisible. So you don't, like, especially in Canada, it is not violent, it's not physical, it's calm. And it comes in many ways. I can just give one example, is gatekeeping. Gatekeeping means that you have very many invisible obstacles that they place, especially on professionals or immigrants. They welcome immigrants, but there are obstacles that they hopefully want to retain you in the place where they would have liked you to be, to continue to colonize you right here. So that, let's say, for example, in the medical sector, they will not allow you to use your traditional herbs. They will not permit you to carry your ethnic food through their airport. So what they'll say is that if you get a nice immigration person, they'll say, you can bring any fruit that does not grow in Canada. And you can imagine that. Which ones does? Tropical fruits. So in terms of food, knowledges, they don't centralize it because the whole system and the educational system and the curriculum is a kind of a brainwashing tool. So what they teach, what they would like to put forward is something that perpetuates the colonialism and their Western narrative. So everything is Eurocentric. So you have to have a very, very keen eye to notice it. And then again, because you have a minority status, or you're few and you're Black, as Professor Wan said, you cannot show the resistance openly. So you resist by decolonizing and coming through these kind of conferences. And I've learned a lot from Professor Wan on decolonization, not just of the mind, even of the spirit. How you learn here to look again, have a second look on capitalism, what imperialism and capitalist approaches were actually introduced by the colonizer. So we are devalued, the food we eat is devalued, your presence is devalued, but again we say, we are here for the long stretch. Because they came to Africa, we are now here, and we want to be here. So it's something that if you don't resist it through your presence and through conferences and through the academy, it's not very simple. So yes, that's the comment I'll have today. We'll talk more next time, and I would really look forward to much more engagement in Mombasa. So we are excited about the conference coming up. Once more, congratulations for these 2 years. Congratulations, Nerissa, and congratulations all the intellectuals, all the intellectuals in the room for making this happen, for anchoring this African space. We are going to work further on expanding our Canada chapter. We have many people coming in. This is the time, they thought it was a joke when I said it's 3 a.m., but we are going to have a meeting, and Professor Wan is going to be our chief whip to whip all of us into coming out with this. This is the least we can give to our continent. So thank you, and thank you for the amazing presentation, Prof. Always a great pleasure listening to you. She's my mentor, just in case. I don't want to miss that, because we learn from somebody. So I challenge the professors in the room to get hold of an individual you may know or you may not know before, mentor people so that they change their minds. My background is in business. I'm an MBA. I'm very business savvy, but I've realized that even business cannot help you if you don't understand what capitalism and all this, where it came from, the background, our continent. Charity begins at home. Thank you and have a good morning, something like that. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Kip, for that. You people are giving us hope. We've not lost everything. We've lost something. But for whatever we've lost, I think we still can recover in other ways. And we also have to remodel, because Africa cannot remain the way it was before. Thank you for that comment. And I don't know if there's somebody else who wants to make a comment. A quick comment from
By Dr. Smith was up.
Yeah, Dr. Smith. And I think I also saw Jeremiah from Sierra Leone's hand, if I'm not wrong.
Yes. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity again. And I want to thank Prof for the amazing presentation on colonization. Yes, I'm able to deduce that in colonization, we need to know the meaning very well. That is to colonize our mind and so also to colonize our culture. You see, most African people nowadays prefer to adopt the Western culture in their dressing code and neglected their own culture. And people are advocating that we need to promote our culture so that our generation will abide by our culture and they will know that our own culture too is very, very paramount to our existence. More so, talk about the language. So many houses in Western and in African countries today prefer to speak the British language instead of their own indigenous language. I could remember during the summer holiday in 2021 that my family, that is one of my uncle's children, came on vacation to our mother. It is very difficult for this our people to have conversation with the children because of lack of the indigenous knowledge. The parents prefer to bring them up with the Western culture. We deprive them from speaking our own indigenous language. I think it's very high time for us to understand that we are not from Western, we are African country. Even though we want to be speaking their language, I think this should go along in line with school. When our children are in school, they can go along with the British language, since it's what we adopt here in African country as a way of measuring our students' capacity in performance. But when we are talking with them, we should let them realize that our language is our language. They need to understand it and they need to know how to speak it so that wherever they find themselves, either in African country or even in relation with other people in Western country, they can be able to present themselves well. And that is why in our language, we believe that charity begins at home. It's what we taught the children from home that will be representing outside. So people need to colonize the mind. We need to colonize our culture. And so also we need to colonize our behavior. I want to relate this to the sicknesses on corruption. People are so corrupt. I cannot imagine people in government to tackle with the fund which meant to take care of the community in general and divert it to their own personal use. leaving the community in suffering, although the government in Africa are making it as part of their policy that corruption is forbidden. But our people taking into this, are they put this into cognizance? Are they thinking of it that even apart from governments, they're beginning to tell people that corruption is not more permissive in governments? Even ourselves, are we having it in mind? Have we colonized our mind that corruption is bad, either to the community fund and even to the family fund? All this is what we need to put into our mind. And this is all what we need to work towards to make African country great. And Prof, please, this is part of what we need to advocate. This colonization is very, very important. You need to put more advocates on it so that our people will understand what the colonization is, so that people can abide by it, and we can most change African country more than how it is now. And this is my submission. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Thank you.
Did I interrupt, Professor? Okay, thank you very much for those comments. I'll allow one comment from Isaruk, and then together you can respond to those two. Isaruk?
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I just want to lend my voice to the last speaker in respect to more advocacy. I also want to thank the organizer of this forum. From what the Prof said, colonizing our hearts, our mind, for we now to decolonize our mind from the Western things is key to our development. For example, in our society, the way the young girls dress in line with the colonial style is baffling, and I even think wondering the next generation how it will look like. Whereby see ladies, even married ladies, wearing things they're supposed to wear even in their bedroom, walking outside the road, traveling with it. It baffles me. So my point is that we have to change our mindset to embrace the culture of our people. When I was small, a woman can wear trousers in the going out. But today, you see women wearing trousers, even wearing shorts. They don't mind moving around the street. So it looks somehow. I know there was a time in Rivers State, Nigeria, where the governor of the state put it as a law, arresting women with indecent dressing. But how long does this take? Today, they say freedom of right, freedom of information, freedom of doing things. It makes people key into whatever they see along the road. They will just key into it and begin to make it a part of their life as a fashion and become the deal of the day. So I still appeal to this body for more advocacy on this decolonization so that we will change our mindset. Even the issue of we talk about the corruption. When we change our mindset towards the good of the people, towards the good of the community, towards ourselves, I don't think we will have a problem. Even anybody that's in a government authority, having decolonized his mind, having a better things to do for the people, he will read there and perform very well. But if his mind is this abused, is it colonized to the Western things or to enrich himself alone, he doesn't think of the populace. It means we will still not go far. So my appeal and my summation is, let us continue to advocate decolonization, to advocate change of our mindset, change of attitude, wherever we find ourselves among the Africans. And also want to appeal those of Africans who are outside the shore of African continent. They shouldn't mind the threat of security, other things. They should also bring that weight of knowledge they have garnered there to us in different fora, so that by the time we cascade it down to the rural area, at least we'll have a better lifestyle. People will change, people will still be tailor their life towards it. Like issue of language, whereby most of us, we don't teach our children our dialect. It becomes an issue. For example, I went for an interview, and one of my was his name is all in English language. There, right down, the permanent secretary asked, "Where are you from?" And he mentioned our place. He not say, "Who did you know here?" Because your name does not bear any name that shows you are from that place. And so the way we name our children, giving a name, English name all through, it's very difficult to identify where the person is from. So we have now to decolonize ourselves. The way we name our children, the way we name our street, the way we name our organizations, to tailor around in our own culture, so that people will begin to know us, we begin to sell ourselves. So this is my humble submission. Thank you. Thanks all the presenters for the wonderful work. God bless you all.
Thank you, Saruk. And, I think we can go on forever on this topic. Maybe we invite Professor to make comments, the last comments.
Yeah.
More so that now to think now, the cultural value system that we had, it had its own good sides. It also had its own not very good side. And now that we are breeding the two with the modern culture and also looking at the old culture, where it doesn't necessarily mean the old is gold and not the old is evil. How can we blend and take advantage of all so that we can live in this current world more easily, and having our ancestors also to guide us in the current time, although they may not have lived in this current time. Prof.
Thank you for those.
Thank
you for those two comments. I'll start by saying that, again, based on the research that I have done, our culture is not static, and our culture has been evolving. And like when you think of the fashion we see from the West, we see fashion designers, we see, women wearing, clothes with one shoulder bare. When you do research, those are all aspects of the African culture. It's amazing. It's amazing. Most of the things you see happening in the West, and they call them modern, they are actually part of who we are. So once we start doing our research, we actually start seeing the reproduction, the repackaging of our own knowledges. Nerissa, I think this is one item. It's important for us to create maybe a way of researching every aspect of our history, because, and Dr. Keep knows it, the people from the West come and research our languages, research our food, research this. They research even our indigenous ways of healing. They repackage it, and they come back as experts. Number two, what I would like to say is decolonizing the mind is the most difficult aspect of it. And I always say that we need to find the ways of regrouping as a group. And I'm so proud of this forum, so that we can start asking ourselves, how do we start decolonizing? Language, I keep saying this, I have been out here for more than 30 years. I've never met a white man, a white woman with an African name. I've never gone to church and I find a white person being baptized using an African name or a name that is not from the West. Why is it that we succumb to using their names as Dr. Isaruk talked about that. Because like my name, Jockey, when you hear the name Jockey, you know very well this is from this particular group of people, because Jockey has a meaning. It means come back. My last name, One, again, is from a very particular region in West Africa, from Senegal. So you know that somehow I crossed boundaries and I ended up in West Africa with the Senegalese. So the two, you know, so I can't hide just from my name. So naming our children could be, you know, those ones that are, you know, going to get married or are planning to have kids. Think twice before you give a name that doesn't evoke our ancestry, that doesn't tell the story of who you are. You need, that's a starting point. And then in terms of corruption, it's a huge debate. It's a huge, huge debate, Dr. Subet. And I have no idea how we are going to do it. We just have to ask guidance from our ancestors and our creator, because corruption is I think the biggest colonial sickness that we have. The biggest colonial sickness that we have, because it's a question of thinking about if let's say like the COVID money was given to African countries, most of that money ended up in people's pockets. It ended up in people's pockets. As I take millions and millions of nairas, shillings, and kwacha, and so on and so forth, and put in my pocket, do we have a conscience? How do we awaken the consciousness of our people? How do we awaken the consciousness of our people? It's another question that we need to address. And last but not least, I'm wearing an African cloth because I think there is power in wearing something physical, not physical, visible, that gives you who you are as an African person. I'm wearing an African dress, an African cloth. Yes, it is constantly evolving. I want to say thank you again, and we can go on and on in terms of decolonizing the mind, healing the colonial sickness. It's a huge topic, and it's a topic that we need to take time to mow it, to understand it, to analyze it, and to come step by step with solutions. Again, Dr. Nerissa, I say doctor, Nerissa, thank you so much for inviting me, and I congratulate every person who has been involved in this forum.
Thank you, Professor, for that. And I think we've ended in a high note, especially when you're talking about corruption. I know traditionally there are ways of dealing with corrupt people, because corruption was there. Nigerians would invoke the god of thunder to visit the person who is corrupt, who's stolen from the people, because you cannot go to court and you cannot argue with the god of thunder. I think that is what we need to go back to. We need to ask the people from West Africans to help us and tell us how we do also, how we can also invoke that god of thunder here in Kenya and the rest of Africa continent. If they can share that with us, I believe we'll get rid of corruption, because they cannot hire lawyers to argue a case against the god of thunder. Thank you very much, and I want to take it back to Larissa to give it.
Thank you so much. I think we've learned quite a lot this morning. And with the colleagues, we still have 2 more presentations, by suggesting that remove them both to afternoon around Professor Matola, because we have a missing program from East Africa team. We have 20 minutes. Either we take in your presentation and then we take your questions in the afternoon, or we do your presentation in the afternoon questions.
Lisa,
Professor Matola, yeah?
can I start?
Yes, please. I was just saying that we still have your presentation by Shufir,
because-
and I'm asking that if it's possible, we take your presentation now for the next 20 minutes, take your
Yes,
questions in the
please.
afternoon, sir?
Yes, now, if I can do it now, because I have some challenge in the afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed. And as you set up, I wish to acknowledge and introduce a new diasporian, Dr. Anna, joining from Sweden. So there's diaspora is expanding. Please proceed, Prof. Dr. Anna will get time later to meet the rest of Africa. Prof.
And
Yeah.
fellow Africans, I must say that I was so impressed with the Dr. Ngoy's paper and the inputs that were made, that I quickly had to change my topic to the decolonization of the African heritage and indigenous knowledge systems. And I just want to provide the parameters of where we can go in terms of that process of decolonization. I'm saying that the decolonization of Africa must begin with the decolonization of the self. This means that the Africans must know who they are, where they come from, what is their purpose in life, and what is their destiny. Only when Africans know themselves and the cosmos or universe they live in, they will know the laws of nature, which govern the 4 quarters and 3 seasons of the year, and align themselves with the related solar and lunar cycles, which are actually the basis of our ancestral worship, which serves to link us not only with our ancestors, but with God and gods of the universe. These cycles control the climatic conditions and the fertility and otherwise of the earth. This means that self-knowledge and knowledge of the cosmos or universe and its operations will empower Africans to find African solutions to African problems of food security, health security, and the production of other necessities of life. The lack of self-knowledge and knowledge of our environment makes us dependent on other nations for all our necessities of life. This makes Africans consumers rather than producers of wealth. It is now generally accepted that Africa is the cradle of humanity and that Africans are the first of all humanity. There is abundant evidence that Africans were the first to receive a revelation about the origins of the ultimate principles of being, known as God and gods. Thus, Africans were able to expound on the evolution of the material worlds from which the spiritual worlds Hello? Hello? Narissa?
Please proceed. It's someone else just answering. Please proceed.
Thus, Africans were able to expound on the evolution of the material worlds from the spiritual worlds. Thus, indigenous African people taught that the visible world was modeled after the spiritual world. The Roman and European imperialist powers condemned and defined African spiritual knowledge as paganism and outlawed it. The indigenous African heritage and knowledge systems are rooted in African spiritual knowledge, which has been replaced by Western secular or materialist worldview, which impede African originality and innovation. Africans cannot and will not find African solutions to African problems without self-knowledge and knowledge of their position within the cosmos or universe. Presently, Africans have been spiritually and intellectually captured or colonized by Western secular or materialist culture, which limits the African innovative capacity. The principal object of my presentation is to liberate the African mind or intellect and soul from the constraints imposed on them from the Western secular or materialist culture in order to unlock the full innovative capacity of the African people. The African sage Nyambe or Kembe, popularly known as Kem, taught us 3 laws of nature: the law of macro-microcosmic emanations, the law of squares, wrongly called the theorem of Pythagoras, the law of analogy, which says as above, so below, the ladder of stars or chain of being. The Western philosophers and scientists that we hero worship today were the students of the African sage Kem or Tautau Harama, Greek thought Hermes. This African sage invented the arts and sciences, including astrology, astronomy, physics, alchemy or hermetic art, today known as chemistry, metallurgy, botany, etc. This suppression paganism has obscured the African origins of the arts, sciences, and philosophy, making us believe that the arts and sciences originated in Europe, not Africa. As Africans, we need to recover African roots of the arts and sciences, which provided the basis for modern sciences and technology. Africa needs a paradigm shift from the Western material worldview to the African spiritual cosmology, which informs the African heritage and indigenous knowledge systems. I want to say that as Africans, we can explain the origins of the universe from nothingness, which manifested itself into 10 principles, which are actually represented by numbers. We can show that actually the numbers, numerology came out of Africa. And the first principles that are worshipped as God and angels, which is 1 + 9 giving you 10, comes from Africa. And that these principles are embodied in the word Amen, which is used by all religions. If you take the word Amen, A is 1, M is 2, E is 3, N is 4, 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 is equals to 10, which means that the whole reality is embodied in the name Amen, which is Amani or Amun, and that's why we have 10 fingers and 10 toes, and all this shows us as Africans, we can explain the whole of being, and therefore we don't need any outsider to tell us who we are, where we come from, because we are anyway the first of all humanity. For instance, this word Amen is also symbolized by a triangle with 10 points inside. With those 10 points, the first point is equals to mind, Atum, The second is equals to Ntu Ra, which is a Virgin Mother. The third is 3 is the Trinity, which is born of the Virgin Mother. The fourth is again Amen, which means the whole reality that emanated from the mind of the universe. Now, from these principles, we are able to explain all the stars. For instance, the first 3 stars, which are called the stars of the Orion belt, represent the spiritual trinity of
Prof, sorry, I've muted you by mistake. I was muting. Ambana, please re-unmute yourself, sir. Sorry, Prof, I muted you by mistake.
Can I proceed?
Sorry, I muted you, I was muting. Victoria, sorry. Please proceed.
The spiritual trinity that manifests itself as Osiris, Isis, and Horus emanates 4 principles called the Keru, which are called the Cherubim in the Bible or the Al-Caribbean in Islam. And these are what I also defined as the 4 holy beasts before the throne of God. All those things were found in Africa before the Bible and the Quran were written. And now they are called Mundu, Mutapa, Mwana Mutapa, and Amani. And they are symbolized by man, eagle, lion, and the Lamb of God. All those things that you find in the Bible existed before Adam. In other words, those that wrote about them got them from the Africans. And these 4 principles were projected into the 4 quarters of the universe. And that's why when we pray, we refer to the God who holds together the 4 quarters of the universe. And when we pour libation, we throw the liquid into the 4 quarters of the world. And now the spiritual world formed by these principles is separated by the zodiac, which was built by the sun god. Now this zodiac, the oldest zodiac comes from the area of the Great Lakes at the source of the Nile. It is called the zodiac of Dendera. And the second zodiac is the zodiac of Kem from Northeast Africa, which was named after the African sage Kem or Thoth-Hermes. The third zodiac comes from ancient Ethiopia, which is the zodiac of Meroe, and the zodiac Mapungubwe in South Africa, the zodiac of Great Zimbabwe. So all this show you that Africa had a shared heritage and knowledge system, which is both spiritual and material. And therefore, we do not need anybody to teach us psychology, spirituality, the universe. We don't even need sophisticated materials to go to the moon, because we can go into the universe intellectually without flying there by Sputniks or other things. And the zodiacs of Africa are connected to the Earth by 7 outer planets called the Kabiri, and this Kabiri form 2 interpenetrating triangles, and then the upper triangle is fire, the lower is water. The fusion of the 2 produces life. That's why we say what is above is the same as what is below, which means the life, our life, come from above. But some people lie and say we evolved from monkeys. There's no African who evolved from the monkey. We have emanated from God and gods, which are spiritual beings. But today we are taken to churches where we are taught to worship white people. They put a white woman, they say it's Mary, Mother of God. They put a white man, they say it's the Son of God. So we are hero worshiping Europeans. We are not hero worshiping God, God is a spiritual being, is a light being, is not a human being. The human being is the material manifestation of the spiritual being. So as an African, you are both spiritual and material. And in Africa, there's no death, because when the physical body dies, the spiritual body ascends to the spiritual world. So I want to conclude by saying that I think we need a paradigm shift from these secular Western teachings, materialist teachings, which make us worship gold and money. And that's why there's corruption. African countries are busy solving problems of corruption instead of coming up with proper spiritually motivated development. I thank you, Nerissa. And I want to join other fellow Africans who say this program will actually redeem Africa and Africans, and it has to be sustained and be strengthened. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Prof, and all the professors in the house who've spoken. I think what you've spoken resonates with what Prof Njoki just talked about, and we're hoping that soon the two of you will give us a paper which is intertwined. I'll still have a few minutes, and I know Prof will not be in the afternoon. Open the floor for comments and questions, and then I'll give the next direction. Anyone who wants to comment, please use the emoji, of course, or the chat. Everyone is congratulating you. They're happy about the presentation, but want to get comments. Use your emoji if you want to make a comment on the presentation. Any comment? Any questions for you as well? From the chat, Regina says thank you. Moses Zimbabwe says thank you. And there's also a contribution by Moses Zimbabwe on the chat. Yeah, Dr. Spence, please. You have a comment, a question, and I would also expect by my own interest, I'd want to get, sorry, before that, by my own interest, I'd want, after you, I'd want to get Professor One, and also His Excellency the Ambassador on comments, and also Dr. Anne. So that's a lineup for me. Okay, proceed.
Thank you very much, Professor Martin, for the presentation. And I can deduce from the presentation that the two religions, that is Christianity and Islam, also talk about colonization. So one should understand that this colonization we are talking about is even being supported by God. We should colonize ourselves. From there, we colonize our mind. From there, we colonize our culture and even colonize the art of worship. By doing so, I think the essence of colonization will be realized by everyone. So thank you very much, Prof, for your presentation. I think it's in line with the first two presentations on the colonization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Spence. Professor Wale, are you in the house? Nigeria.
Yes, yes, I am.
No, Professor Wale first. Professor Wale of
okay.
Nigeria. This West African names mix me up. Professor Wale in the house? Okay, Professor One, because I know your presentation is close to this. Professor Njoki now. Yeah, please proceed. You're muted, Prof. Njoki.
You want me to comment about?
Yeah, I want you to comment because these two presentations are quite close.
No, I must say, Professor, how do you pronounce your last name?
Motsecha.
Motsecha
or Mutsika in Swahili, Mutsika, the fire driller.
Mutika. I must say, yes, there was some synchronicity between between the two presentations. It's as if he had spoken. But of course, Dr. Muteha was expanded. He talked about like what I caught from where I began, the libation, the four corners. The four corners, I said, oh my goodness, now I've learned something else. I need to evoke the four corners when I'm doing that. And then talked about, the various gods, and talked about, I've mentioned a very sensitive topic that we shy away from when we are talking about a white God, a white mother, and so on and so forth. And these are conversations that we should have. These are conversations we should be brave enough and say that the white God, the images that are used in the Catholic Church, they are supposed, because you say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So when you see a particular image, it gets ingrained in that. And that's why the colonizing through religion, by using images that get ingrained in our minds, becomes extremely effective. And there is much more that I would like to share, but not at this particular time. I just want to say thank you for speaking the language that resonates with me, Professor.
Thank you. I hope we'll be in touch. And there are many things you said which I want to follow up as well. So I'll get your contact from Nerissa.
Yes, I think we need to publish, as Nerissa indicated, we need to write a joint paper, because I haven't written any paper on colonial sickness. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, professors. And the rest of us, of course, we appreciate. That's one of our colleagues mentioned. We need to be mentored. Just pick any of us and mentor us. I think we have a lot in common. Our colleagues are missing the program from East African time. Acknowledge all of you came in late. We'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves in the afternoon. So from the East African time, we have to take a 1 hour break from now to East African time, 3 p.m. In the afternoon, we still have one more presentation. So let's join back in the afternoon, pick up, introduce those who've missed in the morning, and then pick the last presentation and do the submissions. Have a good night.